Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of Sex Ed with DB. I, of course, am DB. You know me very well. I'm excited for another listener question today, and this is such a common one. I feel like not even in the context of the podcast, but I feel like me and my friends kind of talk about this all the time. It's just a very common word of mouth question. People are very curious from other people in their communities, from other people who are similar to people who are in the same kind of relationships as other people. And the question here is, how often should I be having sex? This is a huge thing that people want to know. They basically want to know if they're normal. Are they having the quote unquote normal amount of sex? And they basically want to know if they're having too little sex. I think that's the key that people are interested in, of just kind of knowing, am I not having enough sex? I feel like that's what the coded version of that is. And people want to know, how many times per week are people having sex? Is it too little or too much? I haven't had sex in a while, but I feel guilty about it. No spoilers, but I'm just going to briefly gush about the book All Fours by Miranda July. I feel like it is sweeping the nation's women in particular right now, because the author Miranda July really speaks to a lot of things that a lot of women feel when it comes to sex with their partner in long-term relationships. And she has this really funny line where if she hasn't had sex with her male partner in a while, she can almost hear his dick whistling like a tea kettle. Like, she's like obligated to have sex with him. There's this kind of like expectation that women feel to have sex with men when they're in partnered relationships, long-term relationships. If you have not read All Fours, stop this. I'm telling you to stop this podcast right now. Go rent it from the library, go buy it, go listen to it on audiobook. I think it's groundbreaking. I would like to do an entire episode on this book, because it's just so fascinating and so powerful and beautiful and funny, laugh out loud funny. And I read all of it in like 4 days. I basically couldn't put it down. So if you also have read it, please email me, because I'm just dying to talk to people about this. Email me at sexedwithdb@gmail.com and tell me what you thought about it. But I think it does really hit on this piece of like, oh, I feel like I'm not satisfying my man enough. Like, I need to have more sex with him, even if I'm not in the mood, even if I don't want to have penetrative sex, right? So this is all kind of included in this idea of like this guilt that women in particular feel about like them not having enough sex, or, being curious if they're having enough sex. And so I want to take this next few minutes to really like deprogram ourselves. Like, I think we really need to believe that the number of times that we have sex per week is actually irrelevant. We should really be asking ourselves, how do I feel when I have sex with my partner? Am I focusing on the pleasure? Am I focusing on the experience and the mind-body connection? That's what we should really be thinking of. And Dr. Emily Nagoski, we talked about this in our episode 3 Secrets to a Thriving Sex Life. She has something to say about this too. And she's quoted in this really great article that we can put in the description of this episode, where she was speaking at an event, and she's talking about long-term couples and their relationship to sex. And she says, you know what long-term couples who have extraordinary sex talk about? Authenticity, vulnerability, and pleasure. And she also said that communication is very important when it comes to pleasure and sex. And she says the people who have the best sex life talk about it all the time, not because they're trying to solve a problem, but because that's how you stay connected to what's happening to your partner, and what's happening with your own body. I think the talk brings everybody together. And she says the people who have the best sex life talk about it all the time, not because they're trying to solve a problem, but because that's how you stay connected to what's happening with your partner and what's happening with your own body. And so this idea here is that if we focus on the connection with our partner, the authenticity, the vulnerability, the pleasure, we are less likely to become obsessive about like the actual number of times that we're having sex and rather just feel it in our bodies. Like, feel it in your body. If you're someone who's like, oh, I'm really craving this, like really pay attention to that craving rather than have it be like oh, there were 6 days between now and then. I think like the timing could be a good marker for if you're someone who's like, oh, we haven't had sex in a while, like let's make time for this. But if you kind of hear what Nagoski is saying, is that like the people who have good sex lives are talking about it. They're planning for sex. They're not depending on the spontaneity of the thing, because when people have kids and busy schedules and things going on, and they're not likely to both want to take their clothes off at the same exact time. So talking about sex with your partner, saying, hey, if you're in the mood, what do you think about having sex tomorrow? Or what do you think about saving some time on Sunday morning? Or I have a new toy. I really want to try it with you. Do you want to try it with me? Or I'm really wanting to watch this porn video with you. What do you think about that? And so, yeah, I think like being not as obsessed with the number of times that we're having sex per week and how often, and really focusing on the communication aspect, feeling really secure in your partnership by talking about the ways in which that you feel good in your body with your partner, and pleasure will follow. And yeah, so like really deprogramming ourselves. And the final thing I'll say here is that if you and your partner are on different pages about the amount of sex that you each want to have, really, really consider your masturbation practice. Because I think there's this expectation that once we become involved with somebody and we're in a longer term relationship, that our masturbation practice goes by the wayside. And so we're really depending on that other person to bring us pleasure, to make us feel excited, to make us feel loved, to make us come, like all of those things. When the reality is you can make yourself do those things. And if you kind of make time for your masturbation practice weekly or daily or bi-monthly or however feels good, you can be less focused on the last time that you had sex with your partner and more focused on the pleasure that comes. So yeah, thank you for this question. I really appreciate it. Know that you're definitely not alone. I have definitely been someone who's been like, oh, am I like not having enough sex? And the reality is like, fuck it. It really doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with you. Comparison is the thief of joy. You really should just be focusing on what feels good for you and for your partner. And, also opening up the definition of sex. Like foreplay is sex, kissing, touching, oral, all of those things are sex. And just because you're not having penetration as much as you think you should be having, quote unquote, that doesn't mean that you're not having sex. So I think like breaking open this definition, expanding, really thinking about your masturbation practice, and really just understanding that it's not about a number, it's about the quality of the sex. And with that, I'm very, very excited to just hopefully have you all really internalize this and just feel it and know that you are great the way you are. You're perfect. And we don't need to compare ourselves to other people. Am I right or am I right? Next week, I'm coming at you with a question about porn. And I'll be going over the Pornhub 2023 year in review. The question is, what's the most popular porn category? And I am very excited to tell you all about it. Love y'all. See ya. Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel. Our communications lead is Catherine Cohen. Our producer is Sadie Leegee. Our marketing coordinator is Mitch Coburn. Our social media coordinator is M. Kirsty Frazier. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. Do you have a silly sex story to share, need some advice, or have thoughts on the episode you just heard? Give us a booty call for a chance to be featured on the podcast. Check the show notes for the details. For more sex ed content, follow us on IG at sexedwithdb podcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. Want to know your sex toy zodiac sign? Go to our link tree on our IG now. See you next time.